Okay, so I've assembled these things here because I'm about to make my own seed starting mix. It's a soil blend with organic perlite, vermiculite, and organic peat moss. Now I have these screens here that we made for sifting a larger and a smaller size because I've heard that peat moss can have like large debris in it and you want a finer, more delicate substance specifically for starting, you know, delicate little seeds and whatnot. And I have this black tub here for mixing the soil in, and the teapot here is because I just boiled some water because you need to hydrate the peat moss, and I've heard that it can have, just to play it safe, if you want to sterilize the mix, you can pour boiling water over it. That way your delicate seeds, like when they're in that little infant stage, they're not susceptible to get any kind of like weird diseases. And since this was imported from out of country, I know it's terrible of me to even think about using peat moss, how terribly unenvironmentally friendly it is, but I could reach for it quickly at the store, and maybe next year I'll graduate to coconut coir, which honestly would probably be better because I've heard that if you do allow your peat moss mixture to dry out, it can be hydrophobic, which it doesn't want to like hold on to the water in the same capacity that the coconut coir, which is like more sustainable sort of alternative. So actually I think using both in a combination would have been great, but this is what I could readily get my hands on with ease. Okay, so my first task is just to open this bag of peat moss and inspect it and see whether I will need to use these screens or not. Just poured some peat moss in here. It actually looks pretty fine. To be honest, I don't think this needs to be sifted whatsoever, but I've already poured it in. So let's get to sifting. I just gently rocked this tray over, and actually it did sift out some larger pieces. So I'm happy I did that. That actually was good to do. So I'll just use this finer medium for mixing. I just sifted a little more, and I am impressed with the sifting. Our sifter is not very fine. I would say it's under a 1/4 inch, but we got these pieces out. I've actually heard of people shredding these, like processing it to make it smaller if you really need it or low on materials, but I'll just use this in the garden. This will get used for something else. Will not be going to waste. Rafa, I'm trying to work here. All right, so now I am going to mix some water into this. Now, typically a recipe for a seed starting mix calls for about equal parts, 1/3 of the peat moss, 1/3 vermiculite, 1/3 perlite. I don't have a dry quart here to measure, so I'm eyeballing it, but these are 8-quart dry, so about that volume. So I have a little bit more, and I'm fine with that. I think that would be just fine. It's close enough. All right, so we've got our handy teapot here, and I'm just gonna start to pour this over. Like I said, some people use boiling water on this to keep the mix sterile. And apparently peat moss can absorb many times more like water. So it's actually too hot for me to mix right now. So I'm gonna go get a mixing utensil. So I'm starting to learn like what it meant when I heard that this is hydrophobic, because it seemed contraindicative to me that this peat moss can absorb a lot of water, but it also doesn't want to absorb water. So like when it's really dry, it's like takes a while. Like it doesn't want to uptake that. By the way, that little teapot, totally not enough water. I had to grab some spring water, which isn't boiled, but I'm feeling confident that it'll work out. So yeah, I'm just gonna be patient and I'm gonna keep mixing and let this water get absorbed. I personally want to start with like quite a damp mixture, and then once this is wet, it will and you maintain its wetness, I shouldn't have this problem, right? Like, see how it's kind of sitting on top, not absorbing. So we'll just be patient, let this all get mixed and absorbed in, because we want that kind of like clay-like gel texture that'll fit and form in the trays quite well. Got a good bit of water so you can get some drops out of it. And now I'm ready to mix in the vermiculite. So here, in case you're unfamiliar, vermiculite, lightweight, sterile, absorbent mineral with so many uses. So seed starting, #1 use. Can do all these other things. Helps to retain moisture. So that's why we're adding that here. And again, I kind of want like a fine variety of vermiculite specifically for seed starting. So again, I'm just gonna get my hands wet and mix this whole bag in. It actually even says in the seed starting instructions that you want to pre-saturate vermiculite. So I will be dumping the spring water on top of this as well. Now you can actually plant directly into vermiculite, and then it says like in step 5, you would just pull the little plant out and then pot it into soil. But yeah, that method's not going to work for me right now because I don't have enough room for like full-size pots. Got this all mixed in, and now I'm ready for the perlite. And I know it kind of looks like these are styrofoam beads, but actually it helps to loosen heavy soil and prevents compaction, improves aeration and draining in potting mixes. So this is a nice protection if you might be a little heavy-handed with the watering, you think you might overwater. Perlite helps to manage the moisture, which is something that I appreciate. We have arrived with the final mix. I actually am kind of tempted to add some more peat to this just to make my materials stretch further, but it's in a good space right now, so I should probably just not mess with it. See, before it seemed like we had a lot of water but now it's damp, but I can't squeeze drops out of it, so that's perfect. And I actually use quite a bit of water, so we used that whole teapot, and then this was full, so that's probably a couple gallons that I used, so 2 to 3 gallons max is what went into all this. And after I put the perlite in, it says we recommend wearing gardening gloves when using this product. Oops, I was just kind of excited to get my hands into the so-called soil, but note to self, wear gardening gloves next time. Hey, I'm trying to do I just sat down, filled my trays. These guys are love bombing me. So I just got rained out, had to come inside, and I had a thought that I wanted to describe why I'm making my own seed starting mix. Now, of course, you would think it would be easier just to go to the store and buy some. And honestly, I was happy to do that. I went to 2 big box stores and all I had were these small little bags. I would have needed to buy so many of them. And they were of a popular brand whose name I do not want to mention, but because of their association with just GMOs and pesticides and everything, I just didn't want to use that brand. So then I called, rather than wasting my time driving to 2 other places, I called 2 like smaller, like more locally owned type garden landscape places. And I asked if they had seed starting mix specifically, and they both said no. Of course, they have regular potting soil, which I'm sure that's fine to use, and I have used in the past. But this garden is such a big undertaking. I want to do everything I can to increase my odds for success. So I realized, all right, I'm just going to make my own, and I could grab the organic peat moss, and then I ordered on Amazon the perlite and the vermiculite. And so that's how I ended up in this. But in the passive garden, I've used whatever I had on hand. I used native soil, I've used potting soil, I've recycled soil, I've done everything in between. I've used rock wool cubes. So yes, you can be successful doing this a lot of ways. But like I said, I wanted to kind of try this more sterile mix, and there aren't a lot of nutrients in it. That is something that I wanted to comment about. There's not a lot of life in this soil because it doesn't have, you know, mycorrhiza and all the bacterias and all that stuff that I'm used to having, you know, with like compost rich material. But in the early days of the seedlings, until they get like their past like that 2 leaf stage, they get into their like second set of leaves, they really don't need much nutrition. And after that, I will fertilize them with a very mild solution of organic fertilizer as needed. So I'm not too worried that the mix isn't heavy on nutrients, and we'll get the nutrients in the soil anyways once they're transplanted. So I think the organic liquid fertilizer will be enough. in the meantime while they're in the trays. Now, there is a gardening channel on YouTube that I really admire, and they add tons of amendments to their seed starting mix. You know, things like green sand and, you know, compost and, you know, dairy manure and just things of that nature, mycorrhiza. And one day I hope to advance to that level. But leveling the garden is already a really big unexpected expense this year. So I am trying to keep the amount of inputs minimal, and that could be a goal for next season. I hope you have found some of these tips useful and helpful for you. I've done a lot of research to come to this point to make these decisions, and I hope you'll stay tuned for the next video where I will be putting the seeds from Southern Exposure in, and you can watch that and wish me luck and great success as I do to you this gardening season.
But I'm coming home. I'm coming. I'm coming home. I'm coming.
Homestead Overland, Virginia.